Okay, so this video I want to go over the instructions for the Newton's second law simulation. You're going to open up the link on your Schoology assignment, and on the left on the screen here is that link should pull up to this, and you're going to press Launch Tool, and then after you press that you need to press Start. Right, and if you notice you have mass, and you can go up or down with the arrows to change the mass. You have applied force, and that's not the net force. Net force is the sum of the forces. If there's friction that's opposing it, you'd have to subtract to find the net force, but so just keep that in mind. And then surface friction, if you notice, you can up it and it gives you like these values like 0.1 or 0.2, and that's something we'll talk about later on. That's the coefficient of friction. You can increase it though. For this first part of the simulation, you should have the handout. If you look on the right side of the screen, you can see what it looks like, and it's got 10 different trials. It wants you to like for the first one, it wants you to set the mass at 10, so you would go up with the arrows to 10, or actually applied force is 10. Mass would be 2, you set it to that. Friction is going to be at 0 for every one of them on this first part. And then you would press push it. It's going to push it, and it's going to give you a graph, and it's going to give you a net force. It says it's 10 newtons. I would write 10 newtons for net force. You don't have to do anything for the velocity time information. You omit that section. Then you have to calculate your acceleration. Well, how is, if it tells me that my net force in this case, I would write that down, is 10 newtons. And then how would I calculate? You need to calculate your acceleration. If we have the equation F net equals ma, mass times acceleration. And remember, an unbalanced force creates acceleration. If your F net was 0, your acceleration would be 0. But, since we have a net force, how would we calculate that? Well, if we just divide both sides by mass, our acceleration would be equal to F net divided by mass. So for each one of these, in the first one here, I had net force of 10. I divide that by 10 divided by 2. My acceleration would be 5 meters per second squared. And you're going to do that for each one of these trials, set up the way it tells you to, and figure out your acceleration. Now for the second part, when you get to that, it's going to tell you to conduct a controlled study in which you determine the effect of a varying applied force upon the acceleration in the presence of friction. Think hard about what variables change, what quantities you will keep constant over the course of the study. Run several trials in which you collect data to determine this cause-effect relationship. And it says plot the data, but you don't have to do that part there. You don't have to plot it. And it tells you about the frictional value. It refers to the coefficient of friction, not the actual force of friction. That's why its values like 0.1, 0.2, and 0.3. And we'll talk about what all that means later on. But basically, it wants you to just pick some, like an applied force to start with. So I want to start with 10. And you got to reset this every time you do this. So I want to my mass, first mass, 2, my applied force, and once we put a friction in, maybe I'll do 0.1, and I'll write those things in for applied force, for mass, and then that mu is talking about friction, because that's what this friction is. It's the coefficient of friction, and it's mu. So you would write that in. It doesn't have any units to it. And then I would do the same thing. I would write that in, and it's going to give me a net force, in this case of 8.04. I'll write the net force in there. And then again, I'll calculate acceleration using F net equals M times A. And if I just put these numbers in and that I used for my applied force, in this first one I used 10. For my mass I used 2. For my mu, which was my friction, I used 0.1. My net force, it told me it was 8.04. And then I would just find my acceleration. Remember, acceleration is equal to F net divided by M. So I would take 8.04 divided by my mass, which is 2, and it would give me my acceleration. So you'll just change each one of these things. Next on trial 2, change your applied force, change your mass. Keep your, you keep the same friction. Just change up something in there to see the effect it has on your net force. Sometimes if your friction is, you might set some numbers and then push it, and it will not move the object because your friction's too much. You'll have to change some of those variables there. You want to make sure that it actually moves each time and gives you a net force, and then you can, calculate your acceleration.